Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the journal launch event, Signs of Revival. Yay. Right, yeah, give it up. Absolutely. Will more entrepreneurship energize communities? Well, we're going to find out tonight. Welcome to the Kansas Leadership Center. I'm so thrilled to see so many people in the building. And of course, a warm welcome to all our friends joining us via live stream tonight as well. My name is Dennis Clary. I am the Director of Custom Civic Engagement here at the Kansas Leadership Center, and it is my pleasure to welcome you all here this evening. A little bit more on civic engagement here in just a minute. But for those of you that might not be familiar, just a brief background, like the Kansas Leadership Center is a first of its kind nonprofit educational institution. We have a civic mission, a national reputation, and a global reach, something that we are incredibly proud of having built over the last 15 years. Founded in 2007 to foster leadership for stronger, healthier, and more prosperous communities. So that brings us to tonight. Why are we here, right? In addition to celebrating this great piece of journalism, what is our purpose, right? You heard me mention it just a minute ago. Healthier, more prosperous communities. Well, how do we go about getting there? How do we go about doing that? Well, in recent years, the Kansas Leadership Center has invested much more of its time, resources in what we refer to as civic engagement efforts. And you can think of that broadly as people exercising leadership on a very specific issue of public concern. And it's been really interesting what we found. And to give you some examples, we've learned that when you bring the right people together, a reflective group of stakeholders with good, accurate information, that's incredibly important, and provide them with a healthy, trustworthy process for discourse, then you get lasting, authentic results and progress ensues. And that's really what we're all about here, progress on our most difficult or adaptive work. And we've seen it time and time again, whether it's was with our Kansas Beats the Virus initiative with the state of Kansas, our work with the city of Wichita on their non-discrimination ordinance, or even assisting USD 345 with their namesake discussion. And so that is why we are here tonight, to convene multiple perspectives to explore what kind of leadership is necessary to cultivate thriving entrepreneurial communities. And we're very grateful that you all decided to join us for the conversation. So thanks again for being here. One point of logistics for tonight: if you intend to speak, if you got a question, you're going to contribute to the dialogue, we ask that you please use a microphone. There are plenty throughout the room. Just flip the switch up and on, hand it to your neighbor if it's out of reach. We'd very much appreciate that. Okay, to continue with tonight's program, it is my pleasure to introduce not only the visionary behind the journal, but he also serves as its executive editor. Please welcome Chris Green.
Have been to a journal launch before? Just maybe a quick show of hands. Well, thanks for coming back. I'm just really excited to be back. It has been more than 2 years since we last had an event in person, and so it's great to see all of your faces here. How many of you, this is your first time attending a journal launch event? Oh, wow. So that's even more, sorry, people who've been here before, but that's even more exciting to have new people here. And so we have our friends who've been here before. We've had our new friends who are here to have this discussion about entrepreneurship and community vitality. And we have our friends online, and we have what we expect to be a substantial online audience. So this is a little bit like I was telling somebody before the event, like a small television show, more like Wayne and Garth public access than like mass media. But no, this is exciting. And we're going to try to find ways to have a great experience for all of you and ways to bring you together. There is a 30-second delay, so that everything that happens here will happen 30 seconds later out there, but we'll do our best to keep everybody on the same page. A special thank you to our media sponsor, KMUW, Wichita Public Radio 89.1. We're here tonight to talk about the summer edition of the journal, Signs of Revival, and it focuses on the relationship between entrepreneurship and thriving communities. And if you're here tonight, I'm guessing that you're interested in at least one of those issues. And we're hoping to make this an experience that allows you to talk about and think about both. And this is actually the first in a series of events that we're doing related to entrepreneurship. At 8 a.m. on June 15th, there's going to be a live stream conversation where a bunch of our KLC staff are going to get together and talk about the themes from our Heartland Together listening tour, where we traveled to 4 states, Iowa, Kansas, Missouri, and Nebraska, and learned about the challenges and opportunities related to entrepreneurship in those communities. And then on June 22nd, I'm going to be hosting a social media live stream discussion about Ord, Nebraska, which is a community that has invested heavily in entrepreneurship as an economic development strategy and a way to revive their community. And so we're going to get together with some of the key players in that community to talk about what we can learn from Ord, Nebraska. And it's a great example of what we call at the Journal solutions journalism, the journalism magazine that probably looks and reads different than a lot of other media you consume. We really put a spotlight on civic issues and civic issues that are either require more leadership or examples. We look for examples of civic leadership and how those bring about stronger, healthier communities. We'll utilize a couple of different formats for this event. So talking to our tech team, Thane, Jareth, Julian, we talked about how we try to pretty much utilize every bell and whistle that we have in this town hall to try and make this experience a little bit different. And this is not, there'll be some sitting in your seat and some listening and some presentations and some audio visual, but at some point we're going to call upon you to also participate, to talk about what you've experienced, to talk about your reflections and insights and raise questions that you have. Because I think there's a big question underlying this issue in terms of entrepreneurship is something that I don't feel like I've ever been to a community that says, we have too much entrepreneurship. We need to really slow that down. But how do you get more of it? How do you get more people? We have some fabulous examples of people who've really taken risk in their communities, and not just risk to benefit themselves. What they do makes their communities stronger, places to live, healthier places that are more attractive for other people to want to come and live there. We have people doing amazing products and services and things that that they brought into the world that really make lives better for all of us. And yet you have to wonder, who's not in the game? Who's not able to be out there and participate because of the way that the systems and structures in our city, counties, and state and country work? And so that's the question that I kind of want to be on your mind as we go throughout this. And we've divided this event into kind of 2 case studies. And our first case study will be taking a look at Council Grove and Alma, and we have entrepreneurs from both of those communities joining us today to talk about what they've experienced in trying to bring new business to their community. And we also have 2 stories about entrepreneurs who have really taken off with what they're doing during the pandemic. And so we'll look forward to sort of hearing what's it like to do that, and what lessons and experiences do they have to impart to us that we can take back to our own communities. And I guess if there's an overarching question that I want you to leave here thinking about tonight is, how do we get more of this? And what will it take to really make this state a shining light for people to take advantage of, the opportunity to create new things that make the world a better place? I am fortunate tonight to be joined by a really awesome conversation partner, Christina Long, who is the president and CEO of the Create campaign. Christina is an entrepreneur, a community builder, founder of Create Campaign, which is a minority business development nonprofit. She's a Wichita native. She brings more than 20 years of communication and design experience to CML Collective, LLC, her own graphic design and communication services company, and she's been doing that since 2013. She's smarter than me. She got out of journalism and after successful careers in education and journalism reporting for the Wichita Eagle, and she's numerous honors that include Kansas Minority Business Advocate by the Kansas Department of Commerce's Office of Minority and Women Business in 2018, and she's here today to lend her expertise in helping us make the most meaning out of our conversation tonight. So give it up for Christina.
Yeah. Thank you so much for the introduction and for the invitation to come to a place that I love. I love this place because it allows you to be able to find your U+. I was sitting in like this section when the idea of what would happen if you stretch yourself just a little bit, not beyond recognition, but just a little bit more to emphasize those positives and things of that nature. What would you look like? And at that particular time, I was dealing with, well, what more could I do? I miss journalism so much. I missed it so much. I really wanted to continue to create a platform for positive communications for communities of color like I was doing for the Wichita Eagle, and I see some of my colleagues here. But it was here at the KLC where one of the facilitators said a quote that launched me on my entrepreneurship journey, really. And it is, the comfort zone is a beautiful place, but nothing ever grows there. And so as I thought about what I could possibly do in order to help, again, revive that dream, that journey of mine to tell positive stories that ultimately launched me into creating a marketing company, that ultimately then led me into doing minority business development. It's always that piece. The comfort zone is a beautiful place, but nothing ever grows there. And since then, I've been on an incredible journey, Chris. I've been on an incredible journey helping to allow people who have dreams that may otherwise be overlooked, help them to fulfill those dreams through minority business development. So it is a pleasure and an honor to be here with you all tonight. Along the way, I picked up some amazing new colleagues as well. Network Kansas, you're gonna hear from several of them and many other voices that I happen to know, because Kansas is a wonderful place where you're not so far removed to be connected. So I look forward to today's conversation. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. It's always a pleasure when we can find a way that keeps you involved and have you bring your light to things. I want to talk to you a little bit about your experiences and how your experiences as an entrepreneur have shaped the work that you do now. But I also want to get to these poll questions that we have and get everyone in the room. So while everyone is answering these questions, we're also going to chat and talk a little bit about those things. So one of the things that I like to do is, and that we teach the Kansas Leadership Center, is to get data in the room. And so we have kind of two rooms that we're going to try to get data from. We'll get it from the folks in here in the audience as well as from the folks that are online. And I have three poll questions that we will put up here in a second. And they will give me a sense, give us a sense of who's here and what's important to them. And to join this poll, you can, we got the people who have their phones in the air are not listening to Freebird. They are taking a picture of that QR code, and there's a link. And so we'll have everyone go through these questions, and we're gonna, the way the questions are set up, they'll go through one by one. And so we'll start with the question, and then Christina and I will talk a little bit, and then we'll display the answers so that we give our folks at home enough time to answer. So the first question that I want you to answer is, which of tonight's topics do you care about the most? Are you here because of entrepreneurship? Are you here because you're focused on community? Are you here because it's economic development that really drives you? Or is it all of the above? That's the easy answer. Or maybe it's something else. Maybe it's none of the above. Question two, and we'll get to that in a second, is how well is your community doing when it comes to developing an effective entrepreneurial ecosystem? So this is a way to sort of rate, are you coming here because you think you all are the best in the world? Are you got some things right and some things that you're struggling with? Or are you really coming here because you'd really like to see things be better? Our third question is, and this is an interesting one, when we talk about leadership on entrepreneurship and community and the intersection between it, I'm curious about who you think needs to do that leadership. And so to just make it general, there are several sectors listed, and they happen to be the sectors that KLC works the most with government, education, nonprofit, faith, and business. And then there is another category, and if you want to throw someone in, I'd recommend you don't put someone's name. If you really want them to do more on entrepreneurship, maybe we can hold off on that. But yeah, tell us who you would like to be seeing exercise more leadership. And Christina and I are going to chat for a little bit as we're all giving everybody a chance to fill out those questions. And so, yeah, so you were an entrepreneur, and now you help entrepreneurs. Like, connect those two things for me. Like, how are they connected, and what did you learn from your experience that translates into how you're helping others?
Sure. So I launched a graphic design and communication services company in 2013, and I did that through the help. Again, I'm a reporter, so I don't mind connecting with other organizations, and I was able to get connected with the Kansas Small Business Development Center, who I then got invited to be an advisor with, so that was really interesting. But through that, they helped me to be able to pivot my initial idea and become this graphic design and communication services company. So when I was serving small businesses, I noticed that, sure, I could design your logo, but if you don't have a business plan to accompany that, then what are we doing? It's decoration. And at the same time, there was a group of business leaders who were working with the Wichita Regional Chamber of Commerce. They were coming together every 2 weeks to discuss how do we move Wichita forward through economic development, particularly through entrepreneurship. And they also, amongst other topics, looked at how do we activate Black entrepreneurs. Well, I'm a connector. And so I decided that if service providers are not aware of how to navigate or reach communities of color, and communities of color like myself, you know, we waited too often for ideas to be perfect before going out and seeking assistance. So if we could bring them together, be a bridge, then let's do that. So we planned a half-day forum at Wichita State University. We thought we'd get 35 people out. The idea, get excited at the event, make the connections, but then go build your business. We got 77 Black entrepreneurs that day. They continued to call, and we realized that the need was great. We transitioned into a nonprofit because the work did not stop, and I wanted to make sure it was structured. In 2017, in 2018, Commerce Bank donated and gifted their building at the corner of 21st and Grove to my nonprofit. And it's interesting because that was the bank that my family used to bank at when I was younger. So to come back as an adult and have a headquarters for the space, it has been incredible. And from there, we were identified to bring a national entrepreneurship program to Wichita, which allowed me to hire employees because I'd been doing all of this by myself while doing my for-profit business. The lessons that I have learned along the way are that if you have a supportive community that can truly help you navigate and connect your idea to actualizing it, to launch, then anyone who has grit and who has a will to solve a problem can become an entrepreneur, because on paper I was no one's entrepreneur. And I carried that so strongly so that the ecosystem didn't discount me, and we should not discount the ecosystem and people who are coming through it because they don't fit a certain profile.
So I'm wondering, like from the time that you started with the Create campaign to like where you are now to where you want to go, like where on the scale or where on the journey are you? Are you like doing everything that you want to do, or what's?
I tell people that when you're actually in your business and you're doing that daily grind, that you are doing what you set out to do. It just might not be at scale. And so where we are right now, we're at an interesting tipping point. For those of you all who are familiar with Malcolm Gladwell's work, for so long, again, we've been so lean, doing it so, grassroots, so organically. But now we have resources to be able to do it and to go at scale. And so where we are is where, again, I never imagined that we would be. We have more than 300 to 400 African American, Hispanic, Latinos, and we serve all. But we keep that focus because of the systemic barriers that have been presented and that we must create sustainable solutions around. But we have those markets. We're working in the Kansas City, Kansas area. We just launched in Omaha. My husband, many of you know, he used to work for the Wichita Regional Chamber of Commerce. He has accepted a job at the Tulsa Chamber of Commerce, and so Tulsa's our next market as well. So again, the thing that has helped to make the difference for us and what we're seeing with our entrepreneurs as well is that when you get connected to people who care, to resources who really want to assist and support, not dictate and tell, then we can create a dynamic ecosystem that builds and amplifies. And I want to say it's not enough to just have activities and pitch competitions in the ecosystem. We have to change policies to cultivate the landscape for these businesses, not only to launch, not only to potentially grow, but to thrive in ways that impact people's households. Because if your business is not working for your household, then that's an opportunity that's lost.
So you mentioned the word tipping point. Is there anything specifically, or what's going to make the difference between it tipping one way or the other?
That's a very complicated question. It is not a three-part answer, right? You know, there has to be mindset. There has to be a mindset that, again, we might not be Silicon Valley, but we have tech-enabled companies that are creating wonderful solutions in this market that are worthy of attention and that are worthy of investment. Again, I mentioned this earlier, just because a person doesn't fit a particular background or profile, if they have components that you can tell when you've been in the ecosystem a while, you can tell who is really about it, and maybe some who aren't sure, but who with the right nurturing, the right access to information could launch and grow. We need policies that enable a supportive environment, and policies meaning supplier diversity. For example, if we are not helping to activate an equitable opportunity for companies to contract for services, then we are not allowing maximum opportunity for economic development. And that's just one example of policy. Our investment community and our angel capital groups and folks, we need to make sure that they see potential and promise in the entrepreneurs who are here and that they're invested. And again, making sure if the pipeline is not what they see, then help build it. Help nurture it so that, again, we're not seeking from outside here. We can build up and grow our own. And I could go on, but we have a whole agenda and other voices to hear from, so
We'll have to do a follow-up. Your follow-up story. So how are we doing on the polls, Jared? Yeah, let's see what we're looking at with question 1.
Before we do?
Yes.
There was a question that's not on here. I'm just curious. In the room, and I can't see online land, so I'm sorry, but in the room, if you're an entrepreneur or business owner, can you just raise your hand? Very good. Thank you. Okay, the poll.
Now I have to stand up to read it. So we have a audience that's all in. You're all in for all of it. Most of you are here. It was strong contingents focused on entrepreneurship and community.
That's because it's a room full of mostly entrepreneurs right here.
Next question. How well is your community doing when it comes to developing an effective entrepreneurial ecosystem? Okay, 52%. That's like the most Kansas answer I can possibly think of. We're not the worst, but we're not the best either. And which sector would you like to see more leadership from in your community when it comes to developing? And this is really evenly split. This is interesting. Government leads the way with nonprofit and business and education up there as well, and even faith. Were you able to display the other answers as well? Maybe. And this was a question where you could pick all the answers.
Oh, was it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, so while we're looking for these answers, any thoughts or observations, anything running through your mind about the group that we have assembled and what they're thinking? And yeah.
I was really, oh, here we go, if you choose. That's okay.
Oh. And
so going back, though, to some of the observations I saw, government leading the way, leadership sets a tone. And there is an opportunity for government, not in the bureaucracy of it, but in the influence and the connectivity of it, to be engaged, to help bring information and resources to help create a better policy environment and a better just environment to do business. So case in point, the city of Wichita has invested in a new software system that will help to not only inform people who are wanting to start a business about just some of the resources that are available in the city proper, from the service professionals and providers, but then also if you want to register to do business with the city of Wichita, you can go on that same platform and be able to do that. And if you have questions just about some of the processes about starting business, it's available there as well. It took a little while for the investment to be made, and they convened a stakeholder group to look at, well, if we had a software solution, it's not the single solution, but if we had another tool in the toolbox to help people know how to navigate, then what should it look like and what should it do? And that got done. Now I say that, and I'll throw back to that group of business leaders who began with the Entrepreneurship Task Force. When I started, it was 2015, but I think they had been meeting a year prior too. And one of the tasks that we had was to create just an asset map to say what resources are available in Wichita and who does what. And guess what? That asset map did not get done because service providers would not say what they did best. Everyone did everything well, right? And so how, for an entrepreneur, are you supposed to navigate when really everyone cannot do everything well? You have a specialty. But there were reasons why. Number one, we didn't want to make sure that there's a gap or a hole in what we're doing. We have funders, right? Or they did. I wasn't set up yet. So they had funders who they needed to make sure were very confident in investing and contributing to the nonprofit. But again, how does that help our entrepreneurs? It didn't. And so government being able to get involved in not just what we can't do, but here's some things that we can do to make Wichita and other places as well around the state more accessible with information to help our entrepreneurs and business owners navigate. That's needed. We can't do it in the absence of government. Nonprofit leadership has to step up as well, but understand there's capacity constraints. There's capacity constraints. And so if we're all working deeply in our own areas, but pushing forward in the same direction, we're gonna cover a lot of ground instead of competing and crossing over in the lanes that we know we're not supposed to be in. It all works together.
So I'm going to turn to Sam Smith here in a moment, who's monitoring our conversation on social media, but I really want to open it up to the audience. Based on what we've talked about so far, about the poll questions, anything on your mind or any questions that you have that you'd like to share? We're waiting for Sam to summarize our conversation. And if there are none, I'll turn to Sam.
Right now we just have a group of very attentive virtual attendees because there aren't a lot of questions. So they're just hanging on every word of Christina's.
Okay. Yeah.
That's my interpretation.
Well, perfect.
Good framing, good framing.
Well, any comments or thoughts from the audience in the room?
Did government surprise anyone as a leader? Not really. I see you shaking your head. Okay, Mr. Brewing Company, tell us about it. Why did you immediately shake your head?
For government, you mean
Yeah. That way the online audience can hear you. And thank you for being a good sport. I appreciate it.
Yeah, you're welcome. I mean, I think, it's one of those things that government is always to blame for a lot of things, right? But then there's also, especially in smaller communities where we are familiar with, there's a lot of things that they can do and help. And I think we're going to get into that some, and that's why immediately, when we look at what we've done in our communities and things, there's ways to step up and do some of those. So I guess what I'm trying to say in some words is they get a lot of blame, right? But sometimes stepping up and doing the right thing and making it easier and knocking down some barriers isn't always the easy thing to do. So I think regarding entrepreneurship might be one of the reasons.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It would have been interesting to ask the question of, do people want government doing more or do they want it doing less? We have a question from the back.
What about the role of education in higher ed? I'm thinking, obviously, in Wichita State.
Yeah, Wichita State has been a dynamic partner across the ecosystem, not only in, for example, the Center for Entrepreneurship and what they're doing in creating innovative programming, not just being limited. I mean, the business school is fantastic. Obviously, there's a lot of investment that's going into the business school, but that Center of Entrepreneurship is really looking at what are the needs that are happening with entrepreneurs of potential, and they're working program design around them to educate, but also give that practical application while still being very involved in the entrepreneurship ecosystem. Through the pitch competitions, through the coaching, the mentoring, you can go in and practice your pitch with them. Nancy Kirstenbrock, I mean, amazing. And now they also have a new executive director too. So to have that level of engagement, we didn't even talk about Go Create. We haven't talked about any of the, like Kansas Small Business Development Center as well. They are as well connected with Wichita State University. You have the Public Policy and Management Center that too also helps with the infrastructure building. I could go on and on. The university is doing well in many areas to make themselves be engaged in the conversation, but there are other areas that they need to step up in, and supplier diversity is one of them. They're tackling it. Yes. So I will say that. I am curious too, thank you for your question, about one of the previous poll questions where you could pick what you're most interested in entrepreneurship or community development and economic development. And so there was a entrepreneurship obviously led, but I'm curious because sometimes when we look at economic development, we don't always think about it in terms of entrepreneurship, or that entrepreneurship is part of economic development. Why is that? Yes, thank you.
Start talking and see if I can come up with something. I have a conviction that innovation and entrepreneurship could be and should be even done with standing long-term businesses. But I do think what you're suggesting is that there's a bifurcation, and economic development is about businesses that have been existing for a long time. We don't expect anything creative to come from them, whereas entrepreneurs, can you guys come up with some creative ideas because we're running low? I don't know. Can you speak to that, or either of you, anybody here? I'm curious.
Yeah, I think you hit on something really important. I think you might agree too. And the difference even in vocabulary. You're a business owner or you're an entrepreneur. You can't be both. Thank you for, is there anyone who wants to build off of that? Whether entrepreneur, business owner, or the idea of is economic development inclusive of entrepreneurship? Or I saw when I asked the question, there are a lot of head shaking. We don't necessarily see entrepreneurship always as part of economic development. Why is that? Mr. Gates?
I had another question, but I'll try to answer that one. As from my own perspective, my own experience, people kind of expect entrepreneurs to fail, so it's not necessarily, in my opinion, so it's not necessarily like they're going to add any value until they prove that they are sustainable, and that of course costs a lot of capital to get started, where they might even still fail if someone put the money in but they didn't produce or it didn't pan out the way they expected, or there's economic changes. So I think there's a subconscious conversation that people are thinking when they think of entrepreneurs, like, yeah, well, we'll wait and see, if they can really make it, and then they might be a viable part of our community.
You said a mouthful. Thank you.
Yeah, we have some comments from the virtual attendees. Mike Sherry said, Sam, I chose education as most important because our K-12 schools must let students know that starting a small business is definitely a post-secondary pathway to consider instead of college. Schools are doing a much better job of that now. There is always room for improvement. Perhaps the panelists can speak to that. And then Janet Wade said that many people connect Eco-Devo with industry, large businesses with many jobs.
All this is really rich. You all went deep quickly.
Yeah, so on that last comment, that was something that I wonder if doesn't play into this, that the moving a new business in is quantifiable by many of our preferred metrics. Dollars of revenue, jobs added, things like that. If you take somebody out of those metrics and they become a self-employed entrepreneur, it's hard to figure out where to put them in the boxes that show up attractively on city reports. So I think that's one of the struggles of thinking about especially small business successes and entrepreneurship as economic development.
That's good context.
I've got something more to add to that because I always have lots to say, for better or for worse. I think another area that isn't necessarily mentioned is nonprofit. because there were, and I've been a part of several nonprofits coming to town and opening up offices, and the impact that that has in terms of getting people from outside Wichita to come in to participate in those events, to raise the money, to spend money at the hotel and local restaurants, yada, yada. And I think that gets overlooked a lot of times. And I just think that's something that needs to be brought into the conversation as well, because they do. I mean, it's not necessarily as sexy or exciting as other opportunities, like the whatever may be happening up in the Kansas City area with the Apex funding and all. But it's something that I think people need to realize, that nonprofits can be very entrepreneurial as well.
Thank you for that. In the business conversations, I'll keep going back to 2015, that was safe, so people can't be mad. So long ago, right? But nonprofits were not necessarily at the table in terms of the activities. Now, they were there in terms of the entrepreneurship support organizations that were nonprofits, but talking about putting nonprofits at the center of the table, on the top of the agenda, to talk about the investment and also the contributions that they're making to the entrepreneurship community themselves, that was not the case. That's always separate. Yeah. And so when we talk about opportunities to broaden the perspective of the conversation so we can really pull out an optimal playbook for our city, that's one that got missed.
So yeah, this is a really interesting high-level conversation, and so I think like we want to kind of operate at a couple of levels in this conversation. Like we want to talk about those big conceptual things that we need to think about in order to address our systems. We also want to talk about the individual's experiences of entrepreneurs, and so we have 4 entrepreneurs from the communities of Council Grove and Alma who join us today. They are Jesse and Deidre Knight, and maybe just wave like where you are. You are not have to come up to the front of the room. You can stay seated in your chair. We will ask you to grab a microphone in a second. And from Alma, we have Wrenn Pacheco and Morgan Holloman. And joining us from Morris County Economic Development is Tracy Henry. So let's give them a round of applause and welcome. So we're really interested, I want to start off with Deidre and Jesse and Wrenn, and we'll move to Wrenn and Morgan in a second. But I'm curious about starting your business, Riverbank Brewing in Council Grove, first brewery in Council Grove, and we made a tremendous error by not turning this into a beer tasting launch event. We might, come in with your Riverfest button, but we'll rectify that. We've discouraged, having alcohol at civic events because it just didn't seem to fit, but maybe we should change our tune. But I'm interested about your experience starting your business, and how was it for you, and what went really well for you, and what were the challenges that you faced in doing that?
So first of all, I want to note that we're actually the second brewery in Council Grove. In the 1870s, maybe. There's probably a Council Grove historian on Facebook right now that is correcting us, but there was a brewery in the basement of the Post Office Oak building. So
in the basement of the post office?
Post Office Oak, yes.
Oh, wow.
For a short time. So we're actually number 2. And we'll take that. Some of the challenges, I took some notes on my phone here. I promise I'm not texting people for advice. But I think we talked a little bit about that. As with probably many other people, time and money are both in short supply at all times. We continue to work multiple jobs as we embark on these journeys that we've gone on, many of them at this point. And so we do those things to be able to support this economic development habit that we have. Also, in our community, commercial real estate is very dated and in short supply. So those investments that need to be made to even open a storefront in our community are large investments. We're talking, tearing out concrete floors and starting from scratch. So that was also a really big hurdle for for us and continues to be quite the maintenance project.
Yeah, I think going along with that, creating the challenges, right? Like creating a connection to the community and making sure that what you're doing, the community believes in is sustainable. I think goes a long way to success. So Deidre and I and our other 3 partners have all tried our very best to be very civic-minded, very involved, and put some money into the piggy bank before we remove money from the piggy bank of the community, right? So I think doing that is a challenge in itself, because sometimes, especially in a small town, when you take a big risk, it's met with some skepticism. So putting yourself out there before you do that, maybe making sure that you have the support of the community. Secondly, like Deidre said, the challenge is obvious, but turning an 1880s livery stable into a brewery that was in pretty poor shape to begin with was quite an undertaking. But you said, what has gone well? It's working, and it's paying off, and people are coming and enjoying it, and it's creating a sense of community that I think many small towns need. So that's been very rewarding.
Yeah, and it strikes me like it sort of like embodies like maybe some of the tensions in the community, like between the old and the new, with that, like literally you put your brewery in an old building. And I'm curious, like when we talked about like skepticism, like did you get more people going, oh, you're starting a brewery, or were they like, oh, you're starting a brewery? Well, yeah, what was the balance? Like,
So both. Part of that is part of the economic development talk, because when you say we're not going to hire anyone at first, the 5 of us are going to work, economic development people are like, I'm out. Because unless you're bringing 500 jobs to town, I don't want to hear about it. And but we've grown, we've hired people, we are definitely creating commerce in our community. So that's kind of a balance that still needs to be met. And the second piece, which I don't even remember what was now. What was the second part of your question?
Well, were more people excited? Like,
Yes,
did you feel like you had cheerleaders, or do you feel like you had people waiting for you to fail?
Sure. So both. In Kansas, there's state statute that says that 30% of revenue at drinking establishments has to be food revenue. So we're not planning to serve food. We have a large inventory of food establishments in Council Grove and Morris County. And so our idea was to serve snacks there, to have for people, but for people to bring in food, to get food delivered, for them to go eat at Hayes House and then come over to the brewery. So we asked the county commissioners to let us petition our community to have that added to the next election to be able to vote on. And we did that, but it was not an overwhelming margin. It passed, and we were very happy with that. But yes, there was still some combativeness there with people who maybe thought that this was probably not the best idea.
Yeah, and so as the second brewery in Council Grove, like that was probably hard not to take a little personally, like when you're the thing that's pushing for the change, and it's not what everybody wants to see. Well, I'm curious, so Council Grove, Alma, they're in neighboring counties, feel like very different places with very different challenges, and yet both have examples of people who are, I loved like Morgan's quote in the magazine in the story about, we're grinding it. And I wonder what that looks like in Alma. And does anything happening in Council Grove, what Deidre and Jesse talked about, resonate with you, and what's different to Morgan and Wrenn?
You're closer.
So I think a little bit to touch on what they said. My husband and I have a passion for historic buildings, but you get this old with the new, and you get we don't want the building to change, but we don't want the building to fall apart. And it's like, well, what do you want? And so we have this affinity for these old buildings and places, and our antique store is in an old building, which we were able to, we have since purchased the entire building and have been able to save and renovate something that now has another 150 years in its life. And I see that happening in Council Grove now. I grew up going to Council Grove every winter. Instead of going to Black Friday shopping, my family went to Council Grove, and we did, Shop Small Saturday before it was that. And I've watched Council Grove come from a booming to nothing into back swinging back around. And I think it's taking younger individuals like ourselves to save these downtowns and find, instead of, oh, we want bright and shiny new buildings, let's save what we have. Let's bring history back alive. And I think that that's been a big part that both Morris County shares, the same as Wabunsee, in saving what we have.
Totally agree. My building or my space is in a new construction, so I don't have the challenges. But I have a dream of bringing one of those old buildings back and making a space in a historic building for our direct-to-consumer beef business. When we first started our business, our goal was not to sell retail at all. We were going to ship. We were going to finish and have our beef processed and then ship it out through the state and outside of the state. But we had this opportunity to lease this amazing building that had a retail space built in. And I thought, well, we'll try it, see what happens. And 96% of my beef or more goes out my front door. So in our small community, a very rural, agriculturally based community, that most people would have beef in their freezer. That was my thinking. Like, my neighbors are going to have beef in their freezer from their own herd. They're not going to want to come buy from me. I have a lot of locals that come in and buy from me. But I also have a lot of people from Manhattan, Topeka, Emporia even, that want to drive, that want to come see the Flint Hills, that want to experience what we have. So they'll pop into my beef shop, they'll run down to Morgan's Antique Store, they'll have Mexican food at the Mexican food restaurant, and then maybe run out to the Vollen store and see what they have to offer. So I think our community has same challenges as all small communities, but I think as the youngish, I'm not very young, but the youngish are bringing that energy back to help show what we have in our small rural community.
What do the challenges look like in Alma? What keeps you up at night?
Well, it may not be the. What keeps us up at night is cattle getting out, but that's totally different because that's just part of our livelihood. But I think the challenges that I see is and Morgan and Dylan, that was also interviewed on our side, brought to the forefront that the buildings, people own these buildings, but they don't want to get rid of, they don't want to let go of them because they have some connection. So we have great facility or great spaces that could be amazing, but people don't want to get rid of them. So that's a challenge. And I think there's, as any small community, there's talk and gossip, and I think that is always a challenge, but you can't do anything about it, but keep moving forward and don't worry about what people say. So.
Just to agree with Wrenn, definitely the animosity of, well, we don't want change, but we don't want it to stay the same. And I kind of already touched on that, and that's something that it has to change to stay alive. And we love seeing, I think cross-collaboration has been a ginormous part of what Alma's doing. We have a group of younger people right now, primarily women, which is neat to see, that are saying, hey, you're going to do something this weekend, I'm going to do something this weekend. And on those weekends, I feel like we see the most locals. So my store specifically, I would tell you probably 80% of what we have, maybe 90%, is travelers. They're coming from California, they're coming from wherever, and they saw our sign and we're 3 miles off the interstate. The great thing is we can say, hey, eat lunch at this place and stop up at the beef shop. You don't have to take beef home. She has other things to offer, and she ships. And I think that surprises people that they can spend 2 to 3 hours in Alma. That shocks them, but you can. There is enough to do. There's enough places to stop. Or maybe they just have come to town for gas, and gas is at one end of town. And as they drive through, they're like, oh my gosh, there's all these signs of all these places. And they will stop if they're meandering. And that's been, I think, a really big benefit for Alma.
I'm curious, like between the four of you, like every community that I've been to has always talked about naysayers and the challenges of dealing with naysayers, and it's not clear sometimes whether they're 5% or 50%. But have you found like a formula or like a way of doing things that's been effective at dealing with naysaying, which just seems to be a problem that permeates communities?
I don't know if it's a way to deal with it, but it's a way that my husband and I, like, naysayers can be naysayers, but we're doing what we want to do. This is our dream and our goal. And so if you want to believe in it, great. If you don't, then sorry, go somewhere else. I mean, just let it roll off your back. I mean, that's the best way we can handle it.
I would, touch on that just a little bit of, you have to choose to hear the good, because I think the negative always speaks louder, and that's probably across the world and our nation right now. But there are people who do believe in what we're doing in our community and believe in us. As she's a mother, I'm not, but believe in our school system and believe in that you are raising your children in this community, that potentially they will want to come back, or that, our economic developer and our youth entrepreneur challenge, that, even if just one kid out of Wabunsee County decides to come back, that they would be making a difference in potentially raising their family and potentially leaving this legacy for generations to come. You have to choose what you hear, because it's very, very easy to hear the ultra negative over the ultra positive.
I would just add that success is the ultimate thing to shut up the naysayers, right? Like, if you have to let it roll off your back, just as they said, but it doesn't mean it still doesn't get to you sometimes, right? So you keep pushing on, you keep going. Use your circle of people that believe in you and trust, and it is bigger than a lot of people probably understand. I'm sure that you guys have a support system that is pretty large. We do too. But ultimately, when you have success, it kind of takes the cake, right? Like it's there, and they can't really tell you that it's not working at that point.
So Tracy, I want to turn to you now, and so you have an interesting vantage point. So you are economic developer in Morris County. You have some experience in Alma. I'm curious, like when you look at these two communities, like what is there a formula for success that you're seeing emerging when it comes to entrepreneurship, and what's happening? How would you assess, like, just kind of like from a little higher level systemic point of view about what's going well and what really needs work?
Chris, I'm married to a math teacher, so when you say formula, it gives me anxiety. Because I think when it comes to entrepreneurship, there isn't a formula. There's a key ingredient, and it's these guys. It's the entrepreneurs. And it's those guys that come to you with an idea, and it's not my idea, it's not somebody else's, it's theirs. Then you find the pieces to make the puzzle come together. So it's going to be different. It's going to be different in an ag business. It's going to be different when and again, I was in Wabunsee County with Alma, worked with Morgan right off the bat with our Network Kansas e-community stuff, and her landscaping business is not the same as an ag business, so there's not going to be the same components that you can put into anything to make it work. When I was able to move on to Morris County and worked with Jesse and Deidre and our local newspaper doing the same type of thing, it's a completely different component. I mean, beer and beef go together, yeah, but in two different things. It's grain, there's grain involved, but then it's done. Everything after that are completely different things. So to say that there's one formula, I just don't feel like there is. I think it has a key ingredient, and that's just the entrepreneur. And then finding out their passion and making it their idea and saying, what can I do to help? Not, that's not going to work, or that's a bad idea, because it's not. There's no idea that's a bad idea.
So how do you get these awesome entrepreneurs then to start stuff in your community? Like, do you just have to luck out, win the lottery, or what?
You know what? I've been fortunate enough, honestly, that I can throw a stick and hit one in the two communities that I've been able to be working with. So that's fantastic, because these guys are dedicated and they're driven, and they're not going to listen to somebody that says no. And activity creates activity. when somebody says, and they look at Jesse and Deidre who have multiple businesses, jobs, full-time jobs on top of that. They have their t-shirt business they haven't even talked about. They do so much that somebody goes, well, if they're doing that, why can't I? So activity really creates activity, especially in a small community. It's just like mowing your yard. If your neighbor mows the yard, your yard doesn't look right, you're gonna start mowing your yard, right? You're gonna say, okay, that looks good. Let me try to make myself look just as good. So people are these guys are amazing. I can't say enough because they're creating activity. Folks are seeing what's happening. So again, I could throw a stick and hit an entrepreneur. And if I threw a stick at Jesse and Deidre, they would probably start a new business. They just don't know when to stop. They're serial entrepreneurs, but they're successful because they don't stop.
Well, thank you. Yeah, thank you for that perspective. So we've gone up from the local level to sort of like the county level. I want to take it up to the state level, and we have Christy, Preston, and Ciara Miller from Network Kansas. And so I'd like to talk to you a little bit about like what you've heard and how it compares. But before you do that, maybe just introduce yourself real quickly and talk about your roles for Network Kansas. And everyone should know what Network Kansas is, but let's just make sure that they know for sure.
My name is Christy Preston. I'm with Network Kansas, and I am a senior product manager. We like to refer to ourselves as a coach. So Network Kansas is a state nonprofit organization that provides resources for entrepreneurs across the state of Kansas. And we do that through Expertise, which is our resource or our information center. So if you have a entrepreneur that wants to know how to set up their business as an LLC or any other type of business question, they can call our information center and they can connect them with the right resource. We have over 500 resources. We can also offer assistance through education. So we have several board certified programs that we offer, so that is our education piece, and then of course our economic resources or our gap loan financing programs. So we work with different communities across the state. Currently I am working with our entrepreneurship communities in Southwest Kansas. I live in Northwest Kansas. And we currently have 3 regions, but as of July 1st, we are going to split into 6 different regions.
Yep, so as Christy said, Ciara Miller, by the way, I actually live in the Wichita area, but one of the things, in addition to those expertise, education, and what's the third one? Economic resources. We work with communities that are, or specifically to communities that are rural across the state and distressed. So maybe even if it's in an urban community, it might be an area that is designated with 20% or above in poverty. So our goal was to kind of work with communities and parts of the state that needed that additional leverage. And as she mentioned, e-communities or entrepreneurship communities, that was one of the ways we worked with communities too, again, on a deeper level, instead of just providing statewide resources and we just kind of throw money at it. When we work with e-communities or partners that are part of our e-community partnership, we're there at those team meetings that are meeting regularly. We try to kind of have a seat at the table to really learn those communities and how we can help. And so I work with the central region. It used to have been, or kind of still is, north to south central sliver of the state. But as we're growing, we've moved to 6 regions, and so I'll be in the south central region.
And I'm curious, from what you heard from Morris and the Muncie counties from our guest tonight, how does that compare to what you hear usually, and how similar is it, and what are the different things that you hear that you might have expected to come up but didn't hear?
So when we work with, or when we have communities that are e-communities, now you still get, it's turnover and some things, so there's still some education you have to do, but to us, and to be an e-community, which is typically a county, sometimes it's a town within a county, we kind of consider that like an elite partnership. And there's some criteria to be an e-community, which one is to have a leadership team that's meeting regularly. Sometimes it is, and like in Morris County's case, it's their economic development organization's board. So maybe it is already an existing group. But for us, I think e-communities, which Morris County is, Wabunsee County is, it's really just a group that's meeting regularly, that's local, that's talking about entrepreneurship. And then sometimes they use Network Kansas programs or Network Kansas funding to support something. Maybe it's the gap financing loan, or maybe it's our funds to put on an educational program. But I think the difference to us is having a group that's just talking about it.
And I would have to say that all of the things that they mentioned as challenges, we hear it all over the state. It's not just in one specific area. I feel like you are always going to have those individuals that do not want their community to change. They don't want anyone new moving in. They like it just the way it is. And then you're going to have others that want to be proactive and want to grow and want additional information. So everything that they said is spot on. Those are challenges that we hear about across the state. When we sit in these economic development meetings or these e-community meetings, we are hearing some of those challenges, and the other benefit to having the opportunity to sit in those meetings is that we get to learn about your community and what you're working on, but we can also share. So if I'm in a meeting and that particular community is having some challenges with daycare, they have a huge, they don't have enough daycare providers. And I was just in another county and they found a solution that works for their county. And so we can share those stories. And that goes with the entrepreneurs as well. So we can share those stories and I think it's all about connecting people and just communication as well.
Any advice that you would have from your experience on what communities should be thinking about if they're looking to strengthen their entrepreneurial ecosystems?
Again, I guess know who your entrepreneurs are in your community. Is entrepreneurship a goal in your community? Do you know who those entrepreneurs are? What struggles are they having? How can we help? So I think that's important. I think the other thing that is really important, and I think someone else mentioned it earlier, it might have been someone virtually, getting the youth involved, introducing them to entrepreneurship as a possible career path is huge. Network Kansas has a great program, our Youth Entrepreneurship Challenge, and there are other programs out there as well. But just introducing our youth to entrepreneurship and what is an entrepreneur, and their learning how to solve a problem in their community or fill a gap. That's huge. It's critical thinking, it's problem solving. If just one of those students comes back to your community and opens a business, or maybe they start their business now. Maybe they're baking cupcakes, or maybe they have a lawn mowing service. That's another business in your community. So that's just making your ecosystem even stronger. So I would definitely reach out to your youth in your communities and introduce them to entrepreneurship. And yeah.
Well, thank you.
Go. I think, well, I just want to expand on that a little bit, in that the buzzwords entrepreneurial ecosystem. And I think too that we talked about entrepreneurial or grassroots, maybe things can be entrepreneurship versus economic development. A lot of when we're working with communities, sometimes, you know, it is an economic development director, but if it's the right economic development director that really values the grassroots, that's really where all of our Network Kansas programs fit in, by the way. If I kind of call it traditional economic development of like a business attraction, many of our programs really won't even benefit those types of bigger projects. We're there for grassroots. And so if you're building growing 5 small businesses to get 10 jobs each, or bring in one big company that brings in 50 employees, but then you have, okay, you're bringing in all these employees, or you're growing, then you have to have housing, then you have to have a school, you have to have daycare. And so it all does fit together. And so also when we have e-communities that are part of our group, they have a group that's meeting regularly, but we also encourage and look at who are the people at the table in those groups. Are they inviting local entrepreneurs? Are those on the leadership team? Are there educators, superintendents? Are those people on the team? So bringing in all of those pieces is really important.
Well, thank you. And so let's thank our friends from Network Kansas for their comments. And let's thank our entrepreneurs from Wabunsee and Morris counties for not just being interviewed, for not just being photographed, but being willing to come out and hold a microphone and talk about their experiences. Grateful to you. We're going to move in a second to talking, shift tacks a little bit and looking at, is this a golden age of entrepreneurship? And looking at 2 examples of people who have really found their businesses blossom during the pandemic. And as we have one of the individuals featured in our magazine, Eddie Sandoval of Pinole Blue, couldn't be here tonight, but Julian Montes, who is here somewhere, has done a video interview with him. And as we're getting that ready, I did want to talk to you, Christina, like what you heard from our guest in Morris and Wabunsee counties and from Network Kansas. Like what are you thinking about, and how does that compare to what you hear about in your work, and anything different or anything that you'd like to throw out there that would also you think be useful in the conversation?
It's just another example of Kansas's connectivity. So I have the privilege of also working with Network Kansas. I tell you, once you get involved, all of the partners just want to circle around you and hold you up, and you want to hold them up as well. And so through Network Kansas, again, this is an incredible organization. These ladies spoke wonderfully to it. But when we really think about the opportunity for us to channel resources in ways that one organization just doesn't dictate, well, you get this, but empowers the local community who is dedicated to meeting and talking and planning and strategizing, that's the key word, around entrepreneurship, and then putting those investments into the entrepreneurs themselves. That is powerful. Right now we're 66 e-communities strong, but we're about to announce 3 others. It's growing and moving. And just because you're in an e-community or not, again, the resource network is 500 plus partners strong. Partners like the Kansas Health Foundation, partners like the Kansas Leadership Center, and other schools. I mean, it is intricately woven to make true and real change in the community. If you doubt, look and see from the Governor Laura Kelly's office, a media release that just came out about a major opportunity that Network Kansas is involved in as it relates to the State Small Business Credit Initiative. $69 million is coming to the state of Kansas to support entrepreneurship and small business. Network Kansas and the Kansas Department of Commerce are part of that. And again, it's going to benefit our whole entire community in state. So the challenges that rural face, they have their challenges, but the challenges that urban areas face as well, there's some of the same underlying challenges. The population sizes are just different, right? And so Kansas has an opportunity to, again, use our ability to be connected one to another, to maximize and mobilize resources, so that whether we're looking at the urban version of the solution or the rural version of the solution, we have solutions that we can put into play. And we are doing it. And we need to celebrate those opportunities where we're doing it well, and we need to challenge as to why we're responding. How do we think we're doing? Just okay? Let's move that okay. We've got an opportunity, again, through conversations that lead to action, because talk alone is for awareness sake, but I'm about impact. Are you all? I think so, right? That's what entrepreneurs do. We solve problems, we solve challenges, we create opportunities to fill in gaps. So the conversations have to lead to action. And I'm very pleased with a lot of the action that we're seeing in rural that's inspiring urban, and urban that can inspire rural as well. But ultimately, again, we're all Kansans. And what do they say? A rising tide lifts all boats. We've got some really good ripples happening. So let's, again, continue to rise. Thank you for allowing me to kind of weigh in on my folks, my people.
Well, thank you. And are we ready to meet Eddie?
Hi, my name is Julian Montes, and I am the Technology and Creative Services Manager here at the Kansas Leadership Center. I had an opportunity to sit down with Eddie Sandoval, the owner of Pinole Blue, and his business partner, Kyle Offit. We had a rich conversation around entrepreneurship and around community building through storytelling. Here is that story now.
My name is Eddie Sandoval, and I started Pinole Blue based off my family roots. My parents are both from Chihuahua, Mexico. Chihuahua is a state in the northwest part and is where half my family still resides. Both my parents' families raised cattle and made cheese on farms that had no running water or electricity. Visiting Chihuahua as a kid, we would bring back family traditions and recipes to the U.S., which inspired me to start Pinole Blue. Pinole Blue, we're a heritage food company that focuses on making products out of organic corn. Pinole, the actual word pinole, means roasted corn flour. Pinole is been around since the time of the Aztecs. And in northern Mexico, there's a indigenous community called the Tarahumaras, who are known for running 50 to 100 miles in the mountains while drinking pinole with water. My family's from the same northern Mexican region in Chihuahua. My dad even knows how to speak their language. He was raised wearing their sandals as well. And growing up, every time we went to Mexico to visit family, we would bring back pinole.
And we just began telling our story of where the ideas came from, doing little vlogs of what it was like to be an entrepreneur, have a small business, and what the day-to-day looked like on it, why our products were different, what value they served.
Being where we are today, especially with social media, with videos, with podcasts, this Gen Z and millennials, we're definitely more focused on the backstory. What's behind that product? What's behind that service? Especially right now, you know, with Instagram Reels, with YouTube, with TikTok. It's just record yourself and talk about it. You may think you're a boring person, but I guarantee you someone else doesn't think you are. Whatever business or service you have, just start recording yourself and talk about the story, because there has to be a reason why you started, why you're doing it, what makes you keep doing it, and that is what people are into. You just want to put your face in front of as much as you can, and the exposure is great, and two, you're going to learn more getting feedback from those people, repeating yourself, and people telling you about your business, and you're going to see what works and what doesn't work, or what people like and don't like. It can be collaborations from, you know, someone that has a lot of following to small following. It's just the more you do that, and the more you network, the more you bring in your little ecosystems, what I call it, it will help you become stronger and better based. The small businesses that helped us at the early stages when we were absolutely nothing. I couldn't even afford a dumpster at our new facility. The neighbor and I had to split a dumpster. I used to not even have an oven. Monica's Bunk Cakes used to have to bake these cookies for me. The Anchor Bar and Grill down here, I used to not even have a vacuum seal, and they used to let me borrow theirs. All the small carnicerias, panaderias that took our product in the early stages and believed in our product, you know, those are people that, yeah, I want to give them a special thank you and a special shout.
Nothing's possible if it isn't for, you know, the help of several people, you know. I
got a contact with Los Tigres del Norte. For the people who don't know Los Tigres, it's like the Mexican Beatles or the Eagles. I mean, they're huge, been on Rolling Stone. Sent them an email, got an email back, got to meet up with them for breakfast. Like, it was just crazy. Felipe Esparza, the comedian, I sent him a message, he responded, and I was able to send him product, get a shout out. Here locally too, like All Things Barbecue, we sent them, they wanted to use our tortillas for a video, and boom, we did a video. A couple of the food bloggers, Lisa with Teleq Foodie, Wichita Baibi. There's a restaurant called El Viejito on the south side, and we did a simple video with him just showing one of his recipes, but we kind of did a little backstory about him and how he got his idea. And that video really blew up. And I'll never forget, he told me that people were stopping in from like Kansas City, Oklahoma City. They were driving in just because they saw that video.
Storytelling was probably the biggest factor, I think, in our success in the most recent years.
Even myself, I didn't think some of my stories or this or that weren't that interesting. But it's been amazing, like just me, telling stories about how the cookie started, how my mom would make these products or the corn tortillas or how this started. And it's just been amazing to see how much other people's lives it's touched and how, like I mentioned earlier, the pride that has came out. And I think that's a big part of our success. You may overlook or you never think no one's actually observing or seeing you, but there's eyes out there.
Really, like with food, you're just trying to bring everybody together, I feel like. So that was something that was kind of, I think, special with what we did, and I feel like was a positive impact.
I just want to say thank you y gracias a todos los que nos han ayudado desde que empezamos desde el principio.
That was very well done. Good job.
The back wave.
Very well done.
Yeah, that's really awesome to be able, for Julian to help us see Eddie and Kyle and their work, as well as I would just love to see a map of all the connections that it took, for them to have the support in the community, for them to prosper. And
That's good. It's a good product. I received a gift basket. At the end of the year, corporations and others, they give corporate gifts, but this gift that came to me from A.B.C. Bilingual was Pinole Blue. Fantastic. And you want to support good people. Eddie's he's a wonderful person. And his motivation, his tenacity, his grit is just really inspiring. TikTok is not for everyone, right? Social media, it has its pros and its cons, but he's really figured out, again, how to navigate and leverage the positives of social media to tell stories. So I'm also wondering, back to that question, why is it just okay, entrepreneurship in our communities? Is it because we have not figured out how to tell the entrepreneurship story of our communities?
Well, Eddie couldn't join us tonight, but we do have an amazing entrepreneur in our presence. Deborah Gladney, co-founder of QuickHire, has also prospered during the pandemic, and we're delighted to have her joining us on the stage for tonight's discussion. Please give her a round of applause. So QuickHire is an app that makes it easier for workers in the service industry and skilled trades to apply for jobs. Deborah and her sister Angela Muwezi Hall they kicked around the idea and concept for years, but decided that the pandemic was bad timing for the rest of us, but it was great timing for you. You officially launched in April 2021, and in a matter of months, these numbers are just kind of eye-popping. You landed $1.41 million in venture capital, and you and your sister are believed to be the first Black women entrepreneurs in Kansas to raise $1 million in seed funding, and one of only two of only about 100 nationwide. And I know this information because Stan Finger, a reporter for the Journal, had that in his story. Wow, congratulations, and thanks for being with us tonight. I told my version of the QuickHire story. I'm wondering what did I miss, or what else would you like to know? Would you like people to know about the story of QuickHire?
That the story's really just beginning, honestly. It's an idea that my sister had. She worked in the inner city schools in Los Angeles, and she had so many kids coming to her office that weren't necessarily college bound. And it dawned on us in that moment, just the disparities between kids who were college bound and kids who weren't. The kids that were college bound had a lot of resources, which is great. We want that. But those that were going straight into the workforce, it was kind of like, good luck, And so they would come to her office with paper applications and just trying to figure out what to do with their lives. And so we realized, gosh, this space is so antiquated, but it's also so sad to be communicating that there's no future if you don't go to college or if you choose an alternative path. And so that's kind of where it came about. And we're continuing to build.
So you had this idea, and it felt like the right moment for the idea. I'm curious, what was really helpful to you in terms of being able to get things off the ground, and what were the biggest obstacles that you faced? I asked these very loaded questions.
I was going to be here all night. So things that helped, obviously the timing was a big thing. It was an idea that Angie, my sister, had for quite some time. But we knew that the HR tech space was a little crowded, and so we knew that timing was going to be a big thing if we were going to be able to make any type of noise in this market. And so when COVID happened, we knew that there were going to be a number of different shifts in the labor market, and so that definitely was kind of the wind at our backs, is because there was just, we've always known how important these type of jobs were, but it took a global pandemic for everybody else to realize. So that definitely helped us. But man, getting started was really, really challenging in a lot of ways. I think every entrepreneur struggles with the access to capital. I have yet to find a new entrepreneur to say they have too much money. I haven't found that just yet. And that was really challenging, especially in the tech space, because I mean, you don't really have any assets or anything, so it was difficult to like try to get a loan or like, really much of anything. And then, the whole, you get funding off of, an idea on a napkin is very like, doesn't really happen, especially in Wichita, Kansas. Like, it's just not a thing. And so I honestly, so when you talked about in the beginning of like how many people are not being able to play in this game, if it wasn't for the fact that my husband got a great bonus that year, we wouldn't be in the game, honestly, because we had no options. We don't come from wealth. We didn't have, that access to capital. And, so that was the only way that we were able to actually put together something, and it was ugly for something, but we put together something that we could then start to validate and get traction and go from there.
It's interesting to note, like there must be something going on right now, because Stan in his story also notes, like, QuickHire is part of a broader movement. This is the biggest boom in entrepreneurship in half a century. Some of the stats from Stan's story, more than 5.4 million applicants for new businesses were filed in 2021, according to the Census Bureau. And that was a 23% increase over the year before, and roughly double what it was a decade ago, which is just like crazy to think about at a time when like everything was so discombobulated and so many things not functioning, that so much would go in that direction. But I'm wondering, like, from your perspective, like does this feel like a golden age of entrepreneurship to you?
Absolutely. I think the pandemic, we all just kind of thought differently about life during the pandemic. You thought differently about, where you want to work, what you want to do, where you want to spend your time. It was really just a moment in time where a lot of us were able to reflect. And so I think that, and we had the space and time. So, both my sister and I, we were still working our full-time jobs, but we were at least able to work from home. And so we were able to build our schedules in a way to where we actually had some capacity to work on the product, capacity that we never had before. When you're just in that daily grind and you got school drop off and running to work and, going to get the kids, taking them, but you finally had a moment to actually work on things that you've never been able to work on before. And so I think that contributed, a lot to the boom. And, I think that at least for us, I really do feel like COVID has forever changed how people approach work, how people approach life in general. And I'm glad that entrepreneurship was one of those areas.
I have one more question I want to ask, but I'm curious, Christina, anything on your mind you'd like to ask Deborah?
Yeah, we're just, again, when you're a trailblazer, there's a lot that goes with it. You got a lot of eyes, a lot of pressure, on top of just trying to be a great entrepreneur. Can you talk about how, we said, is there enough entrepreneurship in the community? Does the city support? Can you talk about how you all navigated your journey through the relationships that you built with the city, and maybe what lacked as you were navigating the space?
It's a really good question. Candidly, I think one of the things that was challenging for us in the beginning is that we just felt like we didn't see ourselves in a lot of the spaces that we were in. It goes, beyond being just a minority, being a woman, being in tech, being in Kansas. Like, we just felt like it was really, really challenging, just trying to figure out, like, what do you do? We didn't have access to a lot of information and a lot of things. But we always we were proud in being scrappy people, that we were like, where there's a will, there's a way. You talk about using your network. What I will say is we definitely utilized our network in the beginning. Before spending $1, we talked to so many different people. So I went to Kansas State, and one of my friends was a senior engineer at Twitter, and so talking to him a lot about tech. My sister had a friend who actually had her own tech company when somebody she met out in LA. So we just did a lot of, kind of research, if you will, trying to figure out what steps do we even take, to build an app, to build a product, because we had no idea. So I think that the network in that sense was extremely helpful. But again, I think a lot of the barriers came from honestly just a lack of representation, and just feeling like, this is a space that we can even infiltrate, and then to your point, having a lot of eyeballs, it's a ton of pressure, and we, like I said, we're still building, we're still really, really early. We still have a lot still to prove, but we know that QuickHire is more than just ourselves, and in order for our community to move forward in entrepreneurship, and even with tech startups and things like that, we know that we have a role to play in that. And we're proud Wichitans, so we want to be able to see Wichita continue to thrive. And so we just know that it's just going to come with the territory. But just trying to be as heads down as we can, and focused on just building the business and reminding ourselves of why we're doing it.
Exactly. And talk about your impact thus far, your results so far.
Yeah, so a little bit about, the business results and impact. So we have over 25,000 job seekers on our platform, and over 50 companies or so that are utilizing our platform today. The biggest thing that really moves my sister and I is just hearing the stories. And hearing the job seekers, because there is like this perception out there that like no one wants to work. But we've received so many stories of people who are like, I've been out of work for so long, and being able to come on your platform and be able to provide for my family. It's stories like that, when I think about impact, that we are the most proud of. All this other stuff as far as, contributing to the entrepreneurship community is amazing, but I think just being able to help just facilitate people's lives improving and changing, that to me is everything.
I'm sure that there's someone out there listening, if not to this, like to some of your other talks and speeches and appearances, who's going to be inspired by your example and like think, I can do this now because I see this person do it. And I wonder, like, what advice would you give to people based on their experiences about how you go about really taking a leap like this?
Just do it. I feel like you're not an entrepreneurship if you're not an entrepreneur until you launch, right? And so I think it's so difficult because sometimes you get caught up in just the ideation phase or, analysis paralysis phase to where you never, ever get to the launch. And I think just that fear of failure is like greater than the desire to succeed for a lot of people. Obviously, do your research. Don't just spend your life savings without, at least having some type of plan. But I always say, like, if you have something, if you have an idea, protect it, know, who you can go to. There are going to be people who will project their fears onto you if you come to them with your ideas, and that can also be crippling as well. So be, protective of your idea. And, like I said, just launch, and I think that you'll learn a lot. And whether that business fails or it succeeds, the next one will be even better, so that's probably my biggest thing.
Well, thank you, and we'll look forward to seeing where things go from here.
Me too. Thank you.
Yeah, you can feel free to stay up here. So we are pushing our time, but I didn't want to leave this room without giving you a chance to talk to someone else. And so find a partner and pair up. It can be someone you know or someone you don't know. And I'd like for you to just spend 2 or 3 minutes talking about an insight or a takeaway that you've gained from this, or a question that you have as a result of what you've heard tonight. So find a partner, talk for a few minutes, and we'll have a quick report out, and then we'll turn you back out. You can go to Riverfest after this. Try to wrap up our conversations in the next 30 seconds or so.
use your nice moderator voice. Excuse me.
All right, let's come back and let's have a few comments from the audience before we get out of here. I want to get Sam Smith's attention at some point and get a sense anything coming in on social media we should be talking about or anything interesting. I sprung that on you. You need a few seconds?
No, I don't. There was a comments from earlier in the conversation that I'll elevate. Marcy Penner says, successful entrepreneurs in rural areas are noticeable, are difference makers, and have passion for their community, or they wouldn't be there. We need to cheer these doers on and listen to them. Luke Mann says, agree, seeing regional and statewide examples help other entrepreneurs see something similar is possible. Many circle on ideas for years, waiting for an entrepreneurial runway to open up. And then Janet Wade had a question earlier in the conversation from folks here, I think. How much info about your efforts did you share while you were planning and working on your endeavors, experiences? I guess this is maybe speaking to the naysayers thing. Like how much are you sharing your story to counteract that? Lastly, Michael Sherry says, he's a journal writer, it comes back to not listening to the naysayers. They are always going to be doubters and people who tell you all the reasons you should not go out on your own.
And Mike is the author of our cover story that features Muncie County, Morris County, as well as Ord, Nebraska. So comments from the audience. What questions do you have? What insights? Let's just get 2 or 3 out before we get out of here. Anyone want to share what you talked about? The Ed O'Malley joke where if you don't want to share what you shared, you can share what your partner said. And
I celebrate the telling of these stories because I think a popular narrative is that the business people today are the Mr. Potters of It's a Wonderful Life. And we have, we heard stories here across our state, across our nation. We have the George Baileys that show up and make a difference one painful day at a time. And I think those are the stories that need to be shared and need to be celebrated, and I'm glad that's happening tonight.
Thank you, and thank you for your contribution to the space. Very much. I got your vote.
Who wants to follow that up?
I was just going to say that I told Stan when he asked about Council Grove that I know we talked a little bit about difficulties that we've had and things like that, but really, all in all, life is absolutely wonderful there, and we couldn't ask for anything more. And I told him that there's been 5 businesses that have opened in our downtown area in the past year, and we were all already there, but we've committed to that place because we've seen other people commit. We've had support from other business owners and things like that. So I think this entrepreneurship role has kind of opened us up to create a life that we love and that we want to live. And nobody's trying to be the next Steve Jobs. We're just trying to make our mortgage payments and be happy where we are. And rural Kansas is poised for so many people to be able to do that because there's space in the marketplace, and it's just a wonderful experience that we've had.
I want to follow up with that. Being not from Kansas at all, I'm a transplant, and being now rooted in Wabaunsee County, making a home there. And I think as entrepreneurs in a small community, or any community really for that matter, we have to work together. Like Morgan said, the collaboration. We have to support each other, and we have to invite those new that are starting a business to cheer them on, because we know how hard it is. We know that grind every single day, and making that mortgage payment or that payment for whatever piece of equipment you need for your business. So I think as entrepreneurs in small or big, we have to shop local, support those, and give back to our community.
Let's give our guest one more round of applause. Let's give a hand to the KLC team that helped make sure that this came off, from our journal writers to our tech team to Sam on social media to Julian. This just takes like a huge effort. And I hope you enjoyed tonight's conversation. Please join us at 8 a.m. on June 15th for the discussion of the Heartland Together tour, and you'll find out more about these themes that KLC staff members learned about while traveling to the 4 states on that tour. And then join us the next week at noon for a Journal Live discussion about Ord, Nebraska, and continue this series of discussions. And so this will not, you know, I knew that like going in, we wouldn't solve like all of our challenges with entrepreneurship and community in 90 minutes or in 105 minutes. But know that this is the start of a conversation that we hope to continue. And one of the reasons why we wanted to have a series was to symbolize that we know that this is something we're going to have to keep coming back to if we really want to see the kinds of discussions happen that will foster change in our state and states across the region. So thanks for being here, and looking forward to continuing the conversation with you.